Hey, what's up, guys? It's me again, Christian Rodriguez, and I wanted to talk about a book that I've been listening to, the audiobook, and it's called The E Myth by Michael Gerber, right? And the takeaways that I got from it so far, and I'm not done with the book, so maybe I'll make another video in the future. But so far, like even when what I've read so far, I find it very important, especially if you're you know, you're starting a business, you've started a business, you have your own business, or you are thinking about starting a business. This is a very important read, right? So like obviously the stage that I'm in right now in my life, I'm in the startup phase for my business. But the thing is, when it comes to like starting a business, a lot of people want to start a business, and I don't blame them, right? Because I've been that way too, right? Like I want to have control of my time. I want to give myself freedom, right? I don't want there to be a cap on how much money I make, right? And a business does that for you. Of course, there's a lot of work up front to get to building a business to get you to where you want it to be, right? But the issue that this book addresses is that most people, when they start a business, they set it up like a job, right? And they say they basically own a job instead of a business. And there's a huge difference because when you own a job, it's worse than a job. It really is. It's 10 times harder than a job. You have all the responsibility like an entrepreneur, but you're working like an employee, right? And at least when you're an employee, you work Monday through Friday, and you know Friday you're going to get paid on Friday, and you also know that you're going to be off Saturday and Sunday. So you could relax Friday night and Saturday, and then Sunday whatever, you get the Sunday blues and you're back there on Monday. But when you own your freaking business and you run it like a job instead of a business, what you end up getting from it is you end up you end up freaking working 7 days a week, right? You end up working 12-hour days, right? He uses an example of there's a business owner. She was a very she was very good at baking pies, right? She was amazing at pies. Everyone loved her pies. And they're like, "Man, you should start a business off of this." And she followed everyone's advice. She ended up opening her own little pie shop, right? And like it's a cute little pie shop. She's very good at pies, and she ended up growing to despise the pie shop. She told Michael Gerber, the author, she's like, pies, the I hate pies. I like she's straight up said she despises pies. And she was describing to him what her day consisted of. And basically she would get up at 3 in the morning, right? Go to the pie shop, prepare the pies, right? Very early. They open up at what, like 8 or 9 a.m. The pies are ready. She works up until 9 p.m., right? She closes up shop. She makes sure everything is closed, clean. Then she goes home, but she can't really relax because she has to go to sleep. And then she repeats that day over and over again. So she wakes up again at 3 in the morning to return to the pie shop and does the same thing, and she sets up the pies. And the thing that Gerber talks about, right? The mistake that she made, and a mistake that a lot of people make, is that he talks about how she sees herself, since she thinks I'm very good at pies and people say that she's good at pies, that means she should be baking the pies, right? But in reality, she should be building a system so other people make the pies while she's building the system behind the pie, right? Behind how to set up the business so it buys her freedom, right? So she's working on her business instead of in her business. And of course, when you start your business, you're probably gonna not probably, you're definitely going to be wearing all the hats, right? You're going to be the technician, you're going to be the manager, you're going to be the entrepreneur. That's another point that he talks about is the 3 points, right? It's the technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur. They all have different objectives. They all think differently. They all operate differently, right? They all have like a different point of view of the business, right? And he says that 90% of people operate like a technician. And when you operate like a technician, you think short term. You think day to day, right? The entrepreneur thinks more, well, the manager thinks more strategically, in the sense that they overshadow like the project, right? Of what's going on. The entrepreneur is the innovator. The entrepreneur is thinking of the future, of the vision, right, of the business. I might have gotten it a little bit wrong, but it's a great book. You got to read it if you want to know more. But yeah, that's an example of it. And he uses McDonald's as an example, right? Because McDonald's is the most successful franchise of in history, and right, I would say in human history, it's the most successful fast food franchise ever, right? You could, if you go, doesn't matter. There's not too many places around the world where you won't find a McDonald's. That's how successful McDonald's is, right? And he talks about Ray Kroc, right? He talks about how obviously Ray Kroc met the McDonald's brothers in California, and they ended up he ended up loving how the system worked with McDonald's, and he focused on repeating that system, and that's what made McDonald's into a fast food hamburger giant, right? And the thing that he talks about, right, is yes, McDonald's is cheap in price, but it's not cheap in quality. Like the burgers aren't cheap. It's the system behind it. It's very easily repeatable, right? A 16-year-old can easily work behind the counter in McDonald's, right? The entire kitchen, the behind the counter can be run by teenagers, and the system won't fail because it's so easily repeatable, right? And basically, Gerber talks about how you need to have your business run. You have to be able to, even if you're not starting a franchise, you have to run your business like a franchise. And at least what I understood from it is he means the system, right? You have to set up a system like a franchise, because franchises like McDonald's are excellent when it comes to building a repeatable system that's not complicated. That's something that an average person could easily just replicate and start doing, and even train others to start doing, right? And then that gets you away from the day-to-day technician bullshit, even the management bullshit, and you could be the entrepreneur, right? And that buys your freedom, right? Because you're not sitting behind making the freaking hamburgers or baking the pies at 3 in the morning, right? You're 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 planning the vision for the business. You're writing down the goals. You're you're looking at the milestones of what the business needs to achieve to get to a certain point, and that's where you want to be, right? And that's what gets you freedom. That's why people start a business, because of that. But people don't realize this little detail, right? Um, Another example of the system that really like resonated with me is he used a barbershop example, right? And in terms of the barbershop, he said, he once went to this barbershop, and it was amazing because they shampooed his head. I think they gave him a coffee every time he got a haircut. They gave him like amazing service. He had such a great experience. He was wowed by it because it ruined his expectations in a good way. Like it disrupted his expectations, right, of a barbershop, that he ended up returning, and he went again. Now it was a little bit different. I think they skipped the shampooing of the hair, but it was still like a great service, and he still enjoyed his coffee after the haircut, and he returned again. They shampooed his hair, they gave him the haircut, but they forgot to give him the coffee. And he was like, oh shoot. He ended up returning again. They shampooed his hair, they gave him a haircut, and they didn't give him coffee, but they offered to give him wine instead. And he ended up never returning. Why? Because he said that he didn't know what he was going to get. He didn't know if he was going to get exactly like what he paid for, what he paid for the haircut. He didn't know if it was, what was it going to consist of. Is it going to consist of him getting a shampoo, him getting a wine or a coffee? He didn't really understand what he was paying for, right? And I experienced this on my own. That's why it resonated with me, because I had a barber too, and he would do something similar. Like the first 2 times I went to the barber shop, he would give me like a face mask while I was waiting, right? And that was amazing. I was like, man, this is such an awesome. I'd never had a barber do that for me before. And like he'd give me the haircut, he would put the towel on my face, then he'll shave like the hot towel. It felt amazing. I would like sleep on the chair, then he would like shampoo my hair, right? He was like really nice guy. And then I remember going back, and like I went for a year, right? I went a little longer than I should have, but basically, like the haircuts were expensive too. But he was giving me he he would do that service a few times, and then he stopped giving me like the facial treatment, right? The face mask while waiting. So I was like, oh, it's not like part of the haircut. It's more like a something he just decided to do, right? So that's one thing, right? So I was like, okay, I guess that's not part of the service. And then he started doing the face mask, and then some days the towel from the towel treatment like felt it just smelled like the towel like smelled weird. It was like, oh, he didn't dry it properly, right? And then there were some days he would be stressed out or like in a bad mood. You could tell, like you could feel it in the air. You could feel it when someone's like not in the best mood that day. Maybe they give off a little bit of an attitude. Like there's been days like he's shown that, and I'm like, oh, okay. And there was just like things. There was a lot of inconsistencies with his process. And what I would say with that is that when you're not consistent, right, with the service that you're building, right, if you don't have like a system in place, like a repeatable system that you can keep doing with your business, this is something that I'm going to implement with my business, especially when I grow. But if you're not consistent with the business, with the if you're not consistent with your system, right, each step of the system, if it's not something that's easily repeatable, what's going to happen is you're going to start mixing things up. You're going to start putting random things in. You're not going to remember exactly how to do it every time. First of all, the employees you have are probably going to be confused. They're not going to understand. The second thing is the customers won't know what to expect, and a lot of them will leave because they won't know what they're paying for, right? There won't be a clear understanding of it. So that's another thing that Gerber talks about in the book. Now, there's a lot more. I still haven't finished it, but it's such a great read. That's why I made a video about it, because I think everyone should, anyone who is in business or thinking of starting their own business should 100% get this book. And the audiobook is great. The audiobook you could get, it's very easy to listen to, easy to understand. But if you want, if you prefer to read, just get the damn book. I have the audiobook. I thought it was fine. But yeah, I highly recommend it, and I hope you guys enjoyed the content. I'm gonna keep creating more book reviews. Leave a comment if you've read the book. Let me know what you guys think. And yeah, take care.